pleasure to introduce KC and the Sunshine.
He sold over 100 million records, had stadiums screaming his name, and yet he says he was the loneliest man on the planet. This is a story of KC, the voice behind KC and the Sunshine Band. A man who ruled the 70s with unstoppable disco hits like Get Down Tonight and That's the Way, I Like It, only to vanish when the lights dimmed. But what really happened to him? Why did he walk away from it all? And how did a brutal car crash almost end his life and career for good? Today, we're diving into the incredible highs and heartbreaking lows of Harry Wayne Case's journey. From a church-going kid in Miami with big dreams to becoming a disco icon who lived fast, loved hard, and crashed even harder. Behind the flashy outfits and funky beats was a man struggling with fame, pain, and the weight of expectations. He had everything except peace.
It took over my body, and it just had that kind of feeling. It just wouldn't let you go.
This isn't just a music story, it's a survival story. A comeback you never saw coming, and a legend who still hasn't given up. If you ever danced to a KC hit or wondered what happens when the music stops, stay with me, because by the end, you'll never hear disco the same way again.
In grade school, when they would put occupation, I'd put entertainer.
Long before disco bowls and chart-topping hits, Harry Wayne Case, better known as KC, was just a kid in Miami with music running through his veins. Born on January 31st, 1951, KC grew up in a working-class family in the Sunshine State, where music wasn't just entertainment, it was a way of life. His mother adored R&B and dancing, while his grandfather played guitar at family gatherings. Sunday mornings meant church, but they also meant gospel choirs and soul-stirring harmonies that left a permanent mark on young Harry. Music surrounded him at home, at school, in the streets. By the time he hit elementary school, he wasn't just dreaming of being a musician he knew he would be. Maybe not. Not someday. For KC, music wasn't a plan B. He hustled to get close to it. He worked at a local record store, lugged boxes at a record distributor called Tone Distributors, and spent late nights hanging around local studios, hoping someone would notice him. And eventually, someone did. That someone was Henry Stone, legendary producer and owner of TK Records. Stone wasn't just in the business. He was a business. He'd worked with Ray Charles, James Brown, and tons of rising stars. And when he met KC, he didn't just see potential. He saw fire. Stone brought KC into the fold not as a star, but as a utility guy. KC ran errands, helped with recordings, and learned every corner of the business.
Didn't think about the end, and we just kept doing it and doing it and doing it.
But behind the scenes, he was writing constantly. At the time, he felt the radio was flooded with gloom and doom. Everything was dark, serious, heavy. KC wanted to flip the script. I wanted something that felt like a party, he later said. Something people could dance to and forget their problems.
On the radio seemed to be very depressed and very dark.
It wasn't just about the beat, it was about the escape. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing a feeling that bursts of joy when the right song hits at the right moment.
Don't go, I'm begging you to...
KC was still invisible to the world, but inside TK Records, something was starting to build. And it wouldn't be long before that sound would become the pulse of a generation. The 1970s weren't just another decade. They were a cultural explosion. And at the center of that explosion was disco. Disco wasn't just a genre. It was a movement. A rebellion with glitter and groove. It welcomed everyone society tried to shove to the sidelines: Black, Latino, LGBTQ communities, women, immigrants. It turned dance floors into sanctuaries where identities blurred, and all that mattered was a beat. For a guy like KC, this wasn't just music. It was home. KC wanted to create a sound that didn't exist yet. Something that mixed the energy of funk, the bounce of island rhythms, and the joy of soul, but bigger, bolder, brassier. At TK Records, he met Richard Finch, a young sound engineer with serious skills. Together, they made magic. Their collaboration was like lightning in a bottle. KC brought the melodies and hooks. Finch brought the technical muscle and bass lines. What they created together was loud, joyful, and unapologetically fun. But their sound had roots. Two key moments helped Casey define what he wanted his music to feel like. The first was at a wedding, where he first heard a Bahamian junkanoo band. It was rhythmic chaos, bells, whistles, congas, and horns all layered into something raw and festive. It made me want to move instantly, Casey said. I wanted that energy. The second came during a Timmy Thomas concert he helped organize. The audience came armed with whistles. The noise was deafening, but the vibe was electric. It wasn't just a concert, it was a celebration. Casey soaked it all in.
Holy shit, you know what I mean? Dude, you did it, you know?
He and Finch began experimenting, combining horn stabs, syncopated bass, four-on-the-floor drums, and playful lyrics that were more about feeling than meaning. It wasn't high art. It wasn't political. It was meant to move you. They released Blow Your Whistle and Sound Your Funky Horn. They didn't explode, but they got people talking. DJs spun them. Dancers loved them. TK Records noticed. Then came the seismic shift, Rock Your Baby. Casey and Finch wrote it, but gave it to George McCrae to sing. That track didn't just chart, it dominated. #1 in over 50 countries. It became one of the earliest disco megahits and put TK Records on the map. Suddenly, the industry wanted more. Radio stations, club DJs, music execs all asked the same question. Who are these guys? Casey had the answer. He had vision, sound, and hunger. All that was left was to take the spotlight for himself. The dance floor was ready, and the Sunshine Band was about to arrive. After the explosive success of Rock Your Baby, the music world took notice. But for Casey, that was just a warm-up. He had a name, a sound, and now, the perfect moment to step into the spotlight. In 1973, while still hustling at TK Records, Casey officially formed a band. Originally called Casey and the Sunshine Junkanoo Band in homage to his Miami roots and the Bahamian rhythm that inspired him, the group quickly evolved. With studio musicians, percussionists, and horn players pulled from the local scene, they locked into a groove that couldn't be ignored. Soon, they dropped the Junkanoo and became the iconic Casey and the Sunshine Band.
You put Casey and the Sunshine Band on at a party, people hit the dance floor.
Then came the hits. Their first breakout moment arrived in 1975 with Get Down Tonight. The track had it all, a funky bass line, a sped-up guitar riff that felt futuristic, and Casey's now signature falsetto. It didn't just climb the charts, it exploded, hitting #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Disco had its new stars, and they didn't stop. Next came That's the Way, I Like It. With a hook so catchy it stuck in your brain after one listen, it became their biggest anthem. Cheeky, repetitive, and impossible to resist, it shot straight to #1. Casey wasn't just making dance music, he was creating moments. By the time they released their third studio album, Part 3, Casey and the Sunshine Band were a certified hit machine. The album delivered a trilogy of disco anthems. Shake, 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 shake your booty. I'm your boogeyman. Keep it coming, love. Each song was a smash. Each one dominated radio, clubs, and charts. They weren't just riding the disco wave, they were the wave. Casey's goal was always simple: make music that made people happy. I wanted songs that made people forget their problems even if just for a few minutes, he said. And in a decade marked by economic turmoil and political scandal, that kind of escapism was exactly what people needed. The band's stage presence was electric. They wore flamboyant outfits, coordinated choreography, and delivered high-energy performances that left audiences breathless. Their sound became synonymous with celebration. Weddings, roller rinks, nightclubs, Casey and the Sunshine Band on the soundtrack of the 70s. Their reach went global. Tours sold out in the US, UK, Australia, and across Europe. They weren't just a band, they were a phenomenon. In 1977, they were tapped for the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack with Boogie Shoes. That one track placed them in pop culture history forever. The album sold over 40 million copies and defined the disco era. And then came the awards, American Music Awards, Billboard Honors, and even a Grammy. Casey was everywhere, TV, radio, magazines. He wasn't just famous, he was iconic. But behind the flashing lights, there was a different reality. Casey later revealed that at the peak of his fame, he felt hollow, trapped. I was on top of the world, he said, but the loneliest person I knew. Nights were spent locked in hotel rooms with security guards posted outside. Fans would swarm the lobbies, just hoping for a glimpse. But inside, silence. Still, Casey kept pushing. The tour schedules got tighter. The expectations got higher. The spotlight grew hotter. And through it all, He gave everything he had. Because a Sunshine Band wasn't just a gig, it was his identity. And no one, not even Casey, could slow down what was coming next. At the height of his fame, Harry Wayne Casey was a superstar. But behind the glittering grooves, his life was anything but glamorous. The disco era was loud, flashy, and fast. The parties were non-stop. The outfits sparkled. The fans were everywhere. Casey was on every TV show, topping every chart, and performing to crowds that screamed every word. But when the stage lights faded, something much darker set in. I can only describe it with one word: lonely. Casey admitted years later. He was adored by millions, but surrounded by silence. He spent night after night locked in hotel rooms, guarded by security while fans waited outside just to catch a glimpse. He had fame, fortune, and power, everything he dreamed of, but none of it felt real anymore. Offstage, the pressure never let up. Interviews, rehearsals, photo shoots, endless tours that didn't stop. And the thing about being the life of the party, you don't get to take a day off. Casey had created a persona fun, funky, full of energy, and now he had to live up to it every day. No matter how tired, how burnt out, or how empty he felt. Inside the band, cracks were beginning to show. The original chemistry that made their music so addictive was slowly unraveling. Creative tensions surfaced. People stopped listening. Some stopped caring. What once felt like a family now felt like a company, and Casey was the CEO alone at the top. The expectations were suffocating. Fans wanted more hits. Labels wanted tighter deadlines. Promoters wanted longer tours. And Casey was running on fumes. It got to the point where I didn't even know who I was anymore, he confessed. And yet, he kept going. Show after show, album after album, smiling through the exhaustion, because quitting wasn't an option. Not yet, but the fun was fading. The groove was slipping. And Casey, once the king of disco, was starting to wonder if the music he created to bring people joy had stolen his own. He was still dancing, still singing, still shining, but deep down, he was starting to break. By 1982, the disco era had started to fade, and with it, the momentum that once made Casey unstoppable. The backlash was brutal. Disco records were literally burned in stadiums. Radio stations rebranded themselves with slogans like "Disco sucks." And the same public that once worshipped the genre now turned its back on it. Casey kept going, touring, recording, trying to evolve with the times. But something had shifted. The joy he once felt was harder to find. The sound that once defined a generation was now considered passé. Then, everything stopped. In January of that year, Casey was involved in a serious car accident. It wasn't just a fender bender, it was life-altering. He suffered a concussion and a pinched nerve in his spine. For a terrifying moment, doctors feared he might be permanently paralyzed. The man who built his identity on dance floors, on movement, on energy, couldn't move. The crash forced him into the one thing he'd avoided for years: stillness. For nearly a decade, Casey's life had been a blur of shows, hotels, interviews, and recordings. Suddenly, he was stuck, in pain, alone, and facing a version of life he never imagined. As the physical pain set in, so did something darker. To cope with the injury, Casey would prescribe painkillers. But what started as medical treatment quickly spiraled into dependency. He withdrew from friends, from bandmates, from fans. The Casey who once lit up arenas with a single note disappeared completely. In 1983, just a year after the accident, Casey walked away from it all. He retired from music. No farewell tour. No grand statement. Just silence. For the first time since he was a teenager, Harry Wayne Casey had no schedule. No spotlight. No next gig. He later described it as both devastating and strangely peaceful. "I had spent more than 10 years giving everything to music," he said. "Every holiday, every relationship, every ounce of myself. And when I crashed, literally, I realized how empty I felt." The world had moved on from disco, and Casey, broken and exhausted, let it. But while the music had stopped, his story wasn't over yet. 4 years after his retirement, Casey disappeared from the spotlight. No music, no interviews, no stage, just silence. He focused on healing. Physically, he recovered from the accident, but emotionally, the wounds ran deeper. He was still carrying the weight of burnout, creative disillusionment, and the toll of addiction. Music had once been his escape, but it had also become his prison. He didn't miss fame, not the flashing cameras or the screaming fans. What he missed was a feeling, that moment on stage when a crowd erupts, when rhythm takes over, when joy is contagious. And then the world came back around. The 1990s brought a wave of disco nostalgia. Bell bottoms made a comeback. Nightclubs started spinning 70s hits again. Movie soundtracks embraced retro funk. Suddenly, Casey's music was everywhere again. Only now, a whole new generation was dancing to it. And then came the call that changed everything. The producers of the Arsenio Hall show wanted to do a special reunion performance with Casey and the Sunshine Band. At first, he laughed it off. He hadn't performed in nearly a decade. The idea of returning felt surreal. But something inside him stirred. He said yes. Casey gathered a new group of musicians. They rehearsed, rebuilt the magic. And when he walked onto that stage, something clicked. The lights hit. The band started playing. The crowd went wild. It was like stepping back into a dream, except now he was awake. I realized I missed it, he said later. Not the business, not the pressure, just the music. And with that, Casey began his second act. But this time, it was different. He wasn't chasing hits or fighting to stay on the charts. He was performing because he wanted to. He rebuilt the Sunshine Band into a high-energy spectacle with 15 musicians, dancers, horn sections, costumes, and choreography that could rival any pop star's tour. His shows became events. Not just nostalgia trips, but full-on celebrations of joy, of resilience, of groove. His music started showing up in iconic films like Forrest Gump, Kingsman, The Secret Service, Watchmen, and Minions, The Rise of GRU. The songs that once defined a decade now became timeless. In 2002, Casey received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame recognition, not just of his music, but his legacy, and the hits kept coming. In 2015, he released Feeling You, the 60s, a tribute to the soul and R&B that shaped his youth. In 2019, he dropped Give Me Some More, Ay Ay Ay, with Tony Moran and Nile Rodgers. And in 2023, he released Romantica, a disco ballad full of heart and flair. Casey had reinvented himself without abandoning his roots. He didn't try to be something he wasn't. He leaned into what made him Casey. Today, at 73 years old, Harry Wayne Casey is still touring, still performing, still shining, and perhaps for the first time, he's doing it completely on his own terms. No expectations, no pressure, just passion. His story is no longer about a rise and a fall. It's about rhythm, resilience, and a return to joy. Because Casey never really stopped. He just paused until the world was ready to dance with him again. From dance floors to film soundtracks, Casey's music continues to live on. His journey wasn't easy. He climbed to the top, fell hard, and still found the strength to rise again, not for fame, but for the love of the beat. Today, Casey is more than a disco icon. He's a survivor, a reminder that behind every glittering spotlight is a real person with real struggles and sometimes real comebacks. So, what's your favorite Casey and the Sunshine Band song? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.